The snow came fast that night, turning the winding mountain road into a frozen trap. 15 bikers, soaked and shivering, huddled together on the roadside, their engines long silenced. They had nowhere to go and no warm shelter in sight. Just when hope seemed thin, a dim light flickered from a small cottage nearby. Inside, Mrs. Clara Thompson, a spry 78-year-old widow with a warm smile and kind eyes, was knitting by her fireplace. She heard the faint honks echoing through the storm. Without a second thought, she grabbed her thick coats, mugs of cocoa, and opened her door. "Come in, quickly. You'll freeze out there," she called. The bikers were hesitant, strangers in the middle of a blizzard, but her gentle insistence and the cozy glow of her home drew them in. She fed them soup, offered blankets, and even let them park their bikes in her small garage. That night, laughter replaced the fear of the storm, and stories were shared around the crackling fire. By the time dawn broke, the storm had passed. The bikers, now warm and grateful, promised to remember her kindness. Mrs. Thompson waved them off, smiling, unaware that her simple act would ripple far beyond her little cottage. The morning air was crisp and quiet, until engines roared in the distance. One by one, 100 motorcycles appeared on her driveway, each rider carrying a token of thanks, their faces beaming with admiration. Kindness, it seemed, had its own way of coming back. The snow had melted, leaving the mountain road glistening under the morning sun. Mrs. Thompson stepped outside, expecting only the 15 bikers she had helped the night before. Instead, a roar of engines filled the air, and one by one, nearly 100 motorcycles lined her driveway. Her hands flew to her mouth in disbelief. Each rider approached her, helmets in hand, their faces reflecting admiration, gratitude, and awe. "We wanted to thank you, ma'am," said one tall biker, holding out a small handcrafted plaque. "Your kindness saved us last night. We'll never forget it." Mrs. Thompson shook her head, tears brimming. "I only did what anyone would do," she whispered. She had never imagined her small cottage could inspire such a response. The bikers, many of whom had never met each other before the storm, now shared a bond forged by her compassion. Some brought flowers, others baked goods, and one even carried a framed photograph of all of them together in front of her cottage. Each gift, simple or elaborate, carried a story, a memory of warmth in the storm. One young biker, barely out of his teens, stepped forward. "I was ready to give up last night," he said, voice trembling. "But your home reminded me that there's still good in the world." His words hung in the cold morning air, striking a chord in everyone present. Mrs. Thompson felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of deep connection, a realization that her small act had sparked hope, unity, and gratitude. The bikers shared laughter, stories, and even songs, turning her quiet morning into a celebration of human kindness. Before they rode off, she looked at the motorcycles glinting in the sun, their engines ready to roar. In that moment, Mrs. Thompson understood something profound. Even the smallest gesture of compassion can create ripples that travel far beyond imagination. As the bikers prepared to leave, Mrs. Thompson invited them in for one last cup of cocoa. The warmth of her cottage contrasted sharply with the crisp morning outside, and the air was filled with laughter, stories, and a rare kind of camaraderie. Each biker took turns sharing how the storm had affected them, how fear and exhaustion had been replaced by hope the moment she opened her door. One rider, a middle-aged man with weathered hands, spoke softly. "I've been on the road for 20 years, he said, "and I've seen plenty of storms, but I've never met someone who would welcome strangers like this." His eyes glistened, reflecting both respect and admiration. A young woman, barely old enough to drive, added, "It wasn't just the shelter or the soup. It was how you treated us, like we mattered. That's something money can't buy." Mrs. Thompson's heart swelled, and she realized that her little acts of kindness, though ordinary to her, were extraordinary to those in need. Outside, the motorcycles gleamed under the sun, lined up like a rainbow of steel and chrome, a testament to unity and gratitude. Some bikers gently placed handwritten notes under the windshield wipers, messages of thanks, drawings, and even poems, each one a small piece of their hearts. Before leaving, they all promised to ride together again, not just as bikers, but as a community inspired by one kind old woman. "You've reminded us why we ride, not for glory or speed, but for connection, humanity, and kindness," said the youngest rider, holding back tears. As the engines roared to life and the bikers disappeared down the winding road, Mrs. Thompson stood in the doorway, smiling, feeling a profound truth settle in her chest. A single act of compassion could ignite hope, create bonds, and inspire countless others to do good. And somewhere along those winding mountain roads, the warmth she gave would travel far and wide, long after the snow had melted. Days passed, but the story of Mrs. Thompson's kindness spread faster than she could have imagined. Local news picked it up, calling her the guardian angel of the mountain road. Emails, letters, and calls arrived from bikers she had never met, all expressing gratitude, sharing their own stories of struggle, and promising to pay her kindness forward. One morning, a local motorcycle club arrived, not just to thank her again, but to organize a small charity ride in her honor. They gathered supplies for shelters, blankets, and warm meals, inspired by the compassion she had shown. Mrs. Thompson, a woman who had lived quietly for decades, suddenly found herself at the center of a movement she had never intended to start. Her neighbors watched in awe as bikers, once strangers, formed a vibrant community. Children waved as they passed, adults cheered, and local businesses offered support, inspired by the ripple effect of a simple act. Mrs. Thompson, who had only wanted to help 15 cold riders, now witnessed the true power of humanity, how one person's selfless choice could ignite a chain of generosity. Late that evening, as she sat by her fireplace once more, she held a note she had received from a rider named Jake. "You didn't just shelter us from the storm, you reminded us that there is goodness in the world worth fighting for. We'll never forget you." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of joy. She realized that kindness wasn't about recognition or reward, it was about impact, however small it might seem in the moment. For Mrs. Thompson, the snowstorm had been just another night. For the bikers and everyone who heard her story, it had been a revelation, that empathy, warmth, and selflessness could change lives, sometimes in ways no one could foresee. Weeks later, Mrs. Thompson's quiet life returned, but the echoes of that snowy night never faded. One Saturday morning, she looked out the window to see a familiar sight, motorcycles rolling down the mountain road, not in a storm this time, but gleaming under the sun. One by one, riders parked outside her home, waving and smiling. This time, it wasn't just the original 15 or the 100 who had come before. Word had spread across states, across communities. People from towns she had never heard of had come to see the woman whose small act had inspired so much good. They brought flowers, handwritten notes, and homemade treats. Children drew pictures of her cottage, labeling it the House of Kindness. Jake, the young biker from that first stormy night, stepped forward. "We wanted to show you," he said, "that your kindness didn't just help us survive a snowstorm. It changed how we see the world, and how we treat others. We've started helping people, paying it forward, because of you." Tears rolled down Mrs. Thompson's cheeks as she realized the truth. Kindness, once sown, grows far beyond imagination. That single night had sparked a wave of compassion, touching lives she would never meet, across towns, even countries. Before the bikers left, they formed a circle, holding hands, engines silent. To Mrs. Thompson, they cheered. For reminding us that humanity matters. As the engines roared and they disappeared down the road, Mrs. Thompson stood in her doorway, feeling warmth in her heart that no winter could freeze. She whispered to herself, "One small act can change the world." And in that quiet mountain town, the legend of the kind old lady who sheltered strangers during a storm became more than a story. It became a reminder. Compassion has the power to unite, inspire, and ripple endlessly through humanity.